Welcome to the March to a Million podcast with Greg DuPont, founder of the Wealth Solutions Network. In this podcast, Greg shares his journey to positively impact 1 million lives by creating an army of financially minded attorneys who embrace an expanded role in their clients' lives. Greg and his guests challenge the status quo in the legal profession and the financial services industry, and show attorneys how they can improve their lives, provide greater value to their clients, and experience greater professional satisfaction. Join us in this movement and strengthen your business by learning how to solve your clients' most pressing financial problems.
Hello and welcome to another March to a Million podcast with your host, Greg DuPont. Today, we are going to do something that we actually just did a couple of weeks ago. So Greg and I were on a panel at an industry conference talking about the great wealth transfer and how vitally important it is for you to create content that is going to attract the next generation. That would be Generation X, Millennials, and then Gen Z. So Greg, you had some really good insights, and I'm really glad that we're distilling in this podcast. Where do you want to begin today?
Well, first, I want the members of WSN or people just following us and starting to think about this a little differently to understand the way that we need to approach these different generations differently. And I know a lot of attorneys have misguided notions as to the ways to approach these different generations, and they're distinctly different. And that was one of the things that you pointed out in your presentation, and I thought, hey, we got to share this with everybody. Just the nuances in moving from the greatest generation to the boomer generation to my generation to your generation, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the more interesting parts of all that conversation that we had, to me, was how the studies have shown the scar tissue from the last few years of financial activity, shall we say, has really affected the younger generation.
Yeah, scar tissue. That's a great way to explain it. I mean, the idea that the way that attorneys have been really marketing obviously would be word of mouth, right? And so we always want to have an organically growing business when it comes to, getting as many referrals as we can, referrals from financial services professionals, from CPAs. I mean, that's the world that they've lived in. Some of them are smart, interactive marketers and will try to do educational workshops. In fact, my wife just went to one with our a family member who's a very, very successful realtor. And she brought an estate planning attorney in to talk about multifamily trusts and some things like that when it comes to real estate. The room was packed, dude. It didn't cost her much in anything at all. But anyway, I digress. So here's the big thing is you have to have this foundation of social proof now. It's not just, well, Greg DuPont sent me, I'm in because I love Greg. That's not how Generation X, Millennials, or Y work. We are going to go ahead and take that initial referral and dive deeply, deeply into content, especially convenient content. And you had some good ideas on that too. So what are the sorts of things that you're already doing to try to attract, or what are some of the things that you heard at the conference that make you want to change the way that Greg is doing this for your practice?
Well, a lot of it ends up being more, right? Part of what we do with this podcast and my sister podcast, the consumer-oriented podcast, is to take this longer form conversation and make it small, soundbitey, and posting that out there into the media world. And it's not so much that we're expecting each one of those pieces of content to be consumed, but as you've reflected throughout our conversations together, it's when that person starts the buying journey, when they've come across you on the other way, then they're going to do a deep dive into all things, in my situation, all things Greg or all things WSN. So that they can get to a point where they're comfortable making a buying decision, and that's the huge differentiator now. As post 2000, the rise of the internet world has fully taken over. Up until then, people like us that were with for lack of a better word, something to sell, we had the information, we had the keys to the information vault, but now these younger generations have been fully immersed in Everything is in there, and if you're not there when they go looking for it, they're saying, well, wait a second, this guy's a fraud.
And you don't exist in their minds, right? And when they do begin that buying journey, this is where the clock starts, right? Which is they have to see content from you and actually consume content from you 20 times before they're actually going to go ahead and take that next action to schedule an appointment to come in and meet with you to do something virtual or something like that. So the frequency of all of the stuff, it used to be 7 touches, it's 20 now. And that is a huge eye opener from the content creation. And what you're talking about is the atomic content method that we've really pioneered here at Proudmouth, where we take this long form content, the podcast that you're creating, the video that you're creating, and chopping it up into as many little pieces as possible. And Greg, so one of the questions that we got from the audience, I loved your answer on this, was, aren't you afraid you're going to post too much?
Yeah, so the misperception that people actually see what you posted.
Yeah.
How much of this stuff that we put out is just lost in the sea of social media? But it just takes that one trigger point that they now go to your YouTube page or what have you to start doing a deeper dive into the investigation of you.
Yeah.
You can't put too much out there, can you, Matt?
Well, no, dude, you can't. And one of the different things is different generations or different businesses have this feeling because we get, you and I are business owners. We get so many emails, and honestly, I unsubscribe from 98% of the things that come into my email box because I just don't care or I don't want it. Mostly because that's actually not how I want you to deliver that material to me. But email is still the most powerful marketing tool, period. Right? I'm not trying to displace that. But dude, if they're sitting there and they're on their phone, if they don't want to read your stuff, they swipe by. They don't get pissed at you, right? And the other thing, so here's the other thing that your audience, has to hear this. Aren't you going to run out of things to say? And I have to create new content all the time. So talk to that. I really, you have a wonderfully fresh opinion on this that I think all of the WSN members need to hear.
You can't say the same thing too many times.
Yeah.
It's when I first started my journey with you and Proudmouth, 5 years ago, when I first started my podcast, my other one, I always felt like I did have to come up with fresh content. Again, it's the misperception, or shall we say the arrogance of believing that every word that I have said has been listened to. It's even when people listen to the podcast, if they're like me, they listen to it at least 1 1/4 speed, if not 1.5 speed, sometimes up to 1.75. And you know what? You sound great at 1.75, Matt. But people miss it, right? The timing is not right for the message. And if you stay with the message, be it our safe money, no unnecessary risk, or the core estate planning conversation that we started with the passage of potentially the greatest generational transfer of wealth, or as I contend, the setup for the greatest confiscation of wealth in the history of mankind by inaction, right? You can't say that enough. You cannot say that enough. If that is your message, that is your mission, then it needs to be said over and over again because they're not hearing it half the time.
No, I always liken this back to, and in fact, I just saw this commercial. My wife and I were drinking coffee, watching funny YouTube videos, and the Capital One, commercial came on YouTube. What's in your wallet? Do you know how long they've been saying that same damn thing? But so everybody who's listening to this should have 3 to 5 major brand talking points that they always say and reinforce, right? and you and I have talked about that before in creating content for this, right? All of your pillars, we need to be hitting those pillars all the time, not in every episode necessarily, but we have to constantly be reminding people of the foundation of what WSN, what your mission and your vision is, which I think you do a pretty good job of that to reinforce that message. We're looking for people who believe in this mission and believe in what you just said, right? This is the greatest wealth transfer, or basically the greatest theft of wealth, period, ever in the history of mankind, due to inaction. And the listeners of this show are primed in the perfect people to go ahead and make that so that doesn't happen.
I think you made this point during your presentation about commercials. I mean, how many times does Pepsi run the same commercial?
Yeah.
How many times Coke run the same commercial? Yeah. What, Winston tastes good like a cigarette should, right? How many years ago was that, right?
Yeah.
It gets programmed into your brain, and effective, shall we say, effective marketing of your message requires persistence, and some little hook, unnecessary transfer, unnecessary confiscation of wealth, right? And if you are an estate planning attorney out there that's just kind of talking about, yeah, I do wills or I do trusts, well, that's not what they're really there for. They're there for the outcome. And if you can find a way to phrase that, that comes from the heart, you can't phrase it too many times. You guys keep saying it. That's what I do. This is my mission. My mission is to save 1 million families from unnecessary risk and the loss of several billions of dollars of family wealth. Come with me if you want to.
Yeah. So there's something I don't hear a lot of non-marketing professionals say what you just said there. So I want to hone in on that for all of the listeners. So many of you focus on the product or the service or the vehicle in which to have the outcome happen. People don't care about that. People don't want to hear the words and wills and trusts and cruts and crats, and they don't want any of that stuff. What they want to know is they want to know exactly, Greg, what you just said. How is it going to make me feel? What is it going to do for me? Don't focus on the fact that you have the greatest trust writing. No, nobody cares. What does that give you? And in your situation, right, it's to be able to help 1 million families, right? And so this is the sort of stuff that is so vital in the communication, especially to Gen X and down, because look, if I want to trust, I'm going to go to LegalZoom, dude. I'm sorry, and I know your listeners probably hate that I would say that, but that's where, or I'll go to GPT. I just had an actual document, a contract written, and it was a non-disclosure agreement written from ChatGPT. Guess what? I sent it to an attorney, and the attorney was like, "Wow, this is really good." So I don't. But what the attorney did do was tell me all of the little things that they were able to do to make it so that I was protected. The document was the document. What he was giving me was that protection. That sort of knowledge, that human component is so vitally important. And the human component, all of the professionals in the WSN network need to lean into how people are going to feel instead of what is actually just going to be done. What do you think about that?
A couple of fine points on that. You just pointed out the difference between knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah.
ChatGPT, all the large language models, they can distill knowledge. But it's when people are paying you, they're paying you for your wisdom. What have you learned? Don't give me more data. I've got that at my fingertips. I need to know how that data doesn't apply. What are the lessons that you have learned in your path that make me feel comfortable that you're going to get me to the destination I want? I'm going to start here, and I want to get over here. And I want you to get me from here to there with the least amount of problems, the least amount of friction, and get me there successfully. I don't want a whole lot of work because I can just go to ChatGPT and say, create me a trust. and it'd be better than a lot of people that don't have that, right? Don't have anything, right?
Yeah.
And it's also going to be a field day for guys like my partner that sue when things like that are wrong. But that's where we are, and you can pull it up any of these mass market document providers and get a document. But it's the insight, the wisdom.
So one of the other things that we talked a lot about on the panel was the media being used, right? So we obviously focus on podcasting together, you and I, but you also post outside of what we build for you for your own private practice. What sort of stuff are you seeing that works? Are you using audio, or are you using video, or are you using combination of both? Do you use text-based posts? Do you use zero-click content? What are you using to help raise the awareness and build that social proof for your independent practice?
The first thing I would highlight is that I go old school with a monthly print newsletter to all of my clients and all the people that have come through our seminar series. So they've touched our world. They're getting a monthly print newsletter that's not some out of the canned thing but it's got a personalized my messaging as the lead. And members of WSN, we have that for them as well. Completely different newsletter, but that's one of the cornerstones that I picked up from my Dan Kennedy trainings over the years. And I remember when I first started doing this with the legal group I was with, there was a story of an attorney that was in northwestern Ohio, just a few hundred miles north of here, that had a 13,000 person print newsletter list. And he was a personal injury lawyer. And I did the math on that. How much of that, each month, what's that number? And he contended that he had data to show that by the end of the month of January each year, he was ROI positive for the year on that newsletter. And that's the power of media that you control. It feels like a heavy investment. It is a heavy investment. I spend $30,000 plus a year on ours, but it is media that you can control. You cannot control any of the other media out there. The next media that you can control is your website if you can get people on it. But so many people's website is the video sales brochure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my team has been playing with, in addition to what we do on LinkedIn and Facebook, they do stuff on Instagram, and they haven't gotten me on TikTok. They're not going to get me dancing. My wife can't get me dancing. They're not going to get me dancing. So, that and email marketing. How do you get the most control? You're close to this world, meaning the production side of things. How often in a given quarter does Facebook jerk around with their algorithms?
It's more than that, right? I mean, and they don't give anybody a heads up. In fact, LinkedIn just changed their algorithm again. I went from so I have a very large LinkedIn audience, and I went from getting thousands of impressions to hundreds of impressions with no explanation why. So my team right now is actively trying to figure that stuff out. But you said something else. There's a very nice undertone of wisdom there that I want to make sure that the audience hears, which is the owned aspect. So you own a mailing list, you own your email list. You're just renting all of the other lists, right? So I have, I don't know, 15, 16,000 people on LinkedIn alone and 60 some odd thousand people on Twitter. I don't own that list, dude. I don't have their email addresses. They haven't gone into my CRM. Same thing with Facebook. I've got a huge Facebook following, and moving them from that into an owned audience, that's what content is supposed to do. And we have something called a perfect content formula that you and I work with on a regular basis. And I think you've actually infused some of this into the whole WSN thing, which is storytelling, education, entertainment, call to action. And every piece of your content needs to have those four components. It goes back to what you were saying before. The will and the trust is not what people want to hear about. They want to hear the stories, right? They want to know the impact that you've had in the families that you've worked with. You do need to be entertaining, right? All of you are very, very good. I shouldn't say very, very good. Most of you are very good at being, to educate people. But most of where estate planning attorneys fall down, dude, is they're terrible salespeople. They don't take the opportunity to have that call to action. And I know that that's part of your training at WSN. So let's talk about CTAs. Let's talk about calls to action. What are you finding that's the most successful in driving people into your pipeline in order for you to set an appointment with them, not just from the educational workshops, but the sort of sayings that you have to get people to take action? What has worked for you?
That's a loaded question there, Matt.
Thank you, man.
Because if I had a magic formula on that, then I would have too much business, right? Because there's so many people out there that are hurting. But what you have to do is you have to, in a very short period of time, you need to build credibility, but not by selling yourself. And that's what all of this stuff is for. So people can go on that path and learn more about you and say, yeah, they know their stuff, and I like them. And there's no magic phrase that's going to get somebody to book on your calendar and be a good prospect if you have to convince them to be there. And that was 13 years of learning.
Ooh.
That, of the being able to move from a position of clients came to you predetermined to want to work with you in a smaller pool, to going out to a bigger pool of skeptics and all that, and trying to figure out which ones are good prospects, which ones are ready to act. And I heard something last week in my training I went up to that's directly pertinent to this, and that is, you need to embrace the power to say no. That your yeses mean nothing until you have the ability to say no, and that's so true. He told the story of a doctor with $10 million that was just rubbing him the wrong way from day one, but he kept teasing to get him to take the business. And he walked out of that appointment, said, nope, you're not a fit for me and what I'm doing. And the doctor said, nobody ever tells me no. He said, well, I guess today's a new day. And the liberating effect of that, going forward from there. And that's what I'm trying to get the people for WSN and just generally, when you go out into this mass marketed world, you said, what, 20 touches to get people's attention? That doesn't mean 20 touches to get a sale.
Oh.
That means to get attention. That's right. And, I've been telling everybody that, your metric is if you can get 1 out of every 10 persons that you have a real conversation with to say, yeah, I like you. I like what you're doing. And the time is right in my world to take action. Let's move. Yep. That's really what the numbers are like. And I spent so much time, energy, and self-reflection earlier on in my career because I was in a spot where when I started, if you came to my desk, we're doing business. Right. To that, and having salesmen telling me marketing stuff along the way saying, oh no, you're going to close 1 out of every 2, right? Because they're trying to sell you on their product.
Yeah.
No, the reality is you have 10 good conversations, and this is a number that's gone on for years, right, Matt, in the industry.
Oh yeah.
If you got 10 good conversations, you're going to get 1. And that's the magic of WSN is you're having these conversations anyways. Just shift your language a little bit. If you do 30, 40 estate plans a year, that means 3 or 4 ancillary services a year, which means 6 figures in your pocket.
Yeah. I really hope people pause and rewind and listen to that chunk again, and maybe at 1.5 times speed. But there is so much wisdom that you just dropped there. It's called the rule of tens, right? You have 100,000 prospects, right? And you just go down, and then after you have this pool of people, this is how many appointments that you get. This is how many people say yes. This is how many people say no. And it really is that 10 to 1. But your WSN members, these existing estate planning attorneys who people want to buy from people they've already purchased from before, because they obviously already like, know, and trust you, or they wouldn't have bought your first thing from you anyway, right? I absolutely love that. And I wish more and more people really realize that's the other big shift that has happened intergenerationally, kind of getting back to this whole great wealth transfer, is boomers didn't mind being sold to, right? Greatest generation didn't mind being sold to. In fact, there was a level of respect for a great sales prowess, right? That is not how younger generations want. They want to be given the chance to buy from you. And all of the WSN members have had people who have bought from them already. And all you're doing is going back to them with another product and service that is going to add unbelievable value to their lives, but more importantly, be wildly profitable for the business. I mean, I don't think you need to weigh those separately. I mean, if it's good for the goose and it's good for the gander, everybody wins. And that's the system you've built.
Couldn't have said any better myself, Matt. I think it's a good summary for us to end today on. What do you think?
Yeah, I do. Listen, and so as we close this up today, I just want everybody to know in the whole WSN network that this great wealth transfer is happening, whether you're going to take advantage of it or not. Right? $74 trillion is going to be given to Generation X alone, and then there's another $70 trillion that's going to be going to Millennials and Gen Z. It's the largest opportunity ever in anything that has to do with estate planning, financial services, or accounting. And if you don't take advantage of it, you are missing the boat unbelievably. So Greg, if somebody wants to know more about how they can go ahead and join and get involved and get actually on this train that's leaving the station, what should they do?
Best place to find us is go to www.joinwsn.com. Take a look at what we got there. You can book in a conversation with me from there. And we can see if this is a fit for your practice.
And it might not be a fit for your practice today, but it might be a fit for your practice tomorrow. All right. So for Greg and everybody at WSN, this is Matt Halloran. We'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.
Thank you for listening to the March to a Million podcast. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available, and get in touch with our team by visiting our website at www.wealthsolutionsgroup.biz, or give us a call at 614-432-8065. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Wealth Solutions Network. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice from qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have.